Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am so happy to be here. This is my third episode. Can you imagine? My third episode of If Comedians Rule the World. I have to say that I am enjoying this so much, but it's become really addictive just looking at the stats in terms of who's downloaded my podcast. It's my very first time of doing a podcast, and I want to thank all the audiences who have downloaded from the United States to Venezuela, to India, to Singapore. I am grateful that you are tuning in, and we will continue to do this on a weekly basis. I have a very fantastic comedian that I want to introduce you to. She is the first female comedian that I am introducing to my podcast, because I was told to be very careful about who I choose. That's what one person told me. I'm sure from the second episode you would have heard what he said. But I decided to go for Sadia Azmat, and I'm hoping that I have pronounced her name properly. But she won't be offended.
President.
Yeah, I am.
No, it's perfect.
I am black anyway, so I can get away with how I pronounce her name. But Sadia, welcome,
President. But oh, what an introduction! Thank you. I'm so delighted and honoured to be your first guest, your first female guest, and I think you're doing really well. The podcast is blowing up, so that's amazing. And yeah, you said my name right, which is refreshing, because not a lot of people first time do. So good.
Well, I have been practicing. But you know, it's really amazing how names are so difficult for certain people to pronounce, and I don't know why, but you know, I seem to have got it right. So how are you anyway? I haven't seen you since the last.
Tell me, what is your podcast called?
It's called If Comedians Rule the World.
Wow.
And that's what it's about. So it's a concept that I thought about while I was in the car driving on the motorway, and I just thought, they always say that these politicians are comedians, but actually they're not. They're not pro-comedians, if you get what I mean. Everyone keeps talking about Donald Trump, he's a comedian, Boris Johnson is a comedian, but in the real sense of it, we have comedians who act like opposition leaders to governments, depending on where they're performing. So, you know, you've got the left wing and the right wing. So I just thought, what if a comedian had power? And, you know, because they're always constantly criticizing these democratic institutions and government, what would you do differently? Choosing just one particular subject. So I just say to a comedian, choose any topic that you want to discuss, that you feel comfortable with. And it's something that has to be current. And let's just go with it. What would you do differently? That sort of thing. And the first episode was on immigration, but we touched on so many other subjects apart from immigration. The second episode focused on the United States of America, because I had this Black American called Brandon Palmer, even though he says he's American, but he lives in the United Kingdom. So I genuinely think he bought his accent from one of these American products, and it's about to expire. Who knows? But so we focus on the United States of America. So I know we've spoken, and but before we go into the subject itself, how have you been? How are you coping with this lockdown in Britain at the moment, if we can call it a lockdown?
Yeah, so we recently gigged together before the lockdown. We was in Reading, and so it was nice to talk to you in person and gig in person as well. We're currently in lockdown too. I have to say I'm doing okay, because, you know, obviously nothing is going to be as shocking as the first lockdown, which was, you know, completely, you know, caught us all by surprise, and there was a lot of unknowns and uncertainties. So I think this time around we all kind of know the drill. Although, you know, I know people are going to say it's a small problem, but like I really wish the gyms were open, because I was kind of getting into a routine. You know, so I know it's like not a big problem on the scheme of things, but like on a personal note, like, you know, it's good to like, I know that our government was like, you should just exercise outdoors, but, you know, there's certain equipment at the gym. Anyway, that's a small side. In terms of, you know, just generally things are okay. I mean, I think we're all kind of at that point where we kind of can see the light at the end of 2020's tunnel, and maybe we're all feeling a bit optimistic about things next year, and hopefully it won't be, it's been different. It's been different. Comedy's been very, very severely affected. Almost at a standstill at some points, like live comedy. I mean, not things that we're doing like podcasts and stuff like that.
Well,
but I'm
yeah,
I'm pleased to. Yeah, go on.
Go on.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say I'm pleased to see that things like production or TV stuff has kind of slowly started to pick up. But I know that live comedy obviously it feels derailed. Let's say.
I would say to you, it feels like a tsunami. It feels like Britain invaded Iraq. Britain invaded Iraq and left it devastated. That's how I feel about the live comedy. But I think genuinely, I have been taken by surprise how a lot of people have, just in a way tried to adapt to produce more content. I think I told you last time, I've now gone viral on TikTok. I have fans on TikTok because I put out video content. But what I didn't know is that you go to the gym. I had no idea that you were a gym person. So that's come to me as a surprise. But that you go to the gym.
The thing what you said earlier, what you said earlier about politicians are not comedians. Yeah. I feel that was quite funny. I think it was quite funny because obviously like comedians do a long time on the circuit, under very difficult unpaid conditions and stuff like that. So I completely hear you. And going to your other point about like it feels like when Britain invaded Iraq, it does feel kind of on the scale. I know it's just like people who are not comedians probably will think that it's not the worst industry. Obviously it's not like a life-saving industry, but actually I think what we do is we do sacrifice quite a lot of our free time and energy, and so to not have the creative space to work on new ideas or to kind of keep building, it has been like a tsunami, as you say. It's been really difficult to have that taken away from you, because normally it's your personal choice. Am I going to do this gig or am I not going to do this gig? But that personal choice has been completely taken away from us. And
I'm at home at the moment, believe it or not, and it feels really odd wearing this uniform talking to you at home. Because normally on a Friday night,
you gig all around the country, right?
Yeah,
you gig all around the country. We saw each other at the Fringe, Edinburgh Fringe last year.
Yeah, it was fantastic.
Obviously, so I can imagine it is difficult getting prepared, but then having to do the performance indoors, it's difficult. But what have you missed apart from comedy?
What have I missed apart from comedy? It's a very interesting thing. I've missed my real friends. I think that's what's been really interesting, because I had no idea that comedy, in short, because I was so immersed in it, I had no idea that I didn't particularly have any social life when I was doing comedy. Does that make sense? Because normally on a Friday and Saturday, I am out there gigging. And all of a sudden, I had this free time. Okay, I could do some creative things. But like tomorrow, I'm actually spending some time with boys I went to school with in secondary school. We have an association, alumni in the UK. And would I have been able to do that if there wasn't a lockdown? I would have told them, sorry, I can't make it. And it's all on Zoom. So I'm now recapturing things, rekindling memories of secondary school days and friends I had. And I'm saying, wow, at one point I genuinely thought, geez, during the lockdown, what have I been doing for 11 years? Was I going through some midlife crisis? Did I not know there was another life? Did I not know there was another life outside the comedy?
It's very demanding,
It's so demanding.
It's a very demanding vocation.
Yeah, it is. And then all of a sudden, it's taken away from you. And you're wondering, wow. And for me, it was more about the fact that I had uprooted myself from one community to embrace another community. And I think this is one of the reasons why I'm doing this podcast. I don't see comedians anymore. I just don't hear
No.
from them anymore, you know? So it's as if everybody's just disappeared. It's like Thanos came and just, you know, flipped his right hand and boom, everyone has
Do you
disappeared.
are you into sports? So like do you like watch the football or not really? Is that your
No,
thing?
nah. Football is not my
Okay.
thing. So it's creative
Okay.
writing now. So I fill my time with creative writing. I fill my time with podcasting. I have after you, I have two more people I'm interviewing
Mm,
today, and you know, I'm just enjoying talking to people and just
wow.
yeah, that's what I've always wanted to do anyway. My greatest fear is that I enjoy it so much that when live comedy comes, I might be saying, nah, I ain't doing it anymore. You know, I just hope I don't
I
get to
don't
that.
think that, because to be honest, I've seen you work really, really hard, like 11 years. I truly think that you'll be able to balance both of them. Like
Yeah,
obviously it will be dependent on, you know, the way you organize it. But I know that, you know, you've put so much hard work. We've both put a lot of hard work into live stand-up comedy. So I can see us being quite grateful for when it does return. And
yeah,
we may approach it a bit differently, but I think it will still be a welcome return, you know.
yeah. It has been a welcome opportunity to just sit back and reflect and be more
Yeah,
strategic in your approach. And so
right.
you're absolutely right. There will have to be a balance. I'm not running around the whole place, you know, like I did previously, because I don't need to prove that I'm funny. I mean, Donald
I
Trump is
think I
leaving.
think it's
Donald
I
Trump is
think it, I think
leaving.
it is complete. I think it is quite a dramatic way, but I think what happens is that, you know, you get an email, can you do this?
Yeah,
And then it's the way that you organize your diary. So it's not so much in our hands when we gig, because sometimes, you know, there's an opportunity, and it's your choice whether you say yes or no.
yeah,
But you know, the encouragement and the positive approach is to basically accept as much as you can,
mm,
so that you can, you know, continue working on your craft. And
yeah,
so I can understand what you're saying, and I think I sometimes think to myself as well that, you know, I would like a more organized approach. But when push comes to shove, you know, like, you know, the standby email you and say, you know, I've got these dates, but I've only got these dates, you're going to say yes, you'll bite their hand off.
mm,
And then that will be, you know, a weekend that clashes with bloody an anniversary or something.
yeah,
And
yeah.
you know,
Exactly.
you have to make that choice,
I will ask
you
you a
know.
question. I'll ask you a
So
question
it's
before.
easy.
Go on.
No, I'm finished, thank you.
Yeah, what I was going to say as well is what will be really interesting is what the lockdown has made me do actually is think about how many hours was I spending writing material, how many hours was I spending networking, you know, because that's one of the things I have picked up about this game, that you've got to be a good networker.
Mm.
It's not just about being funny. And there is, even though the comedy market has shrunk like a stock market, that's the way I see it, like a stock market crash. But before the second lockdown, there were some small gigs happening, but it was only the few that were
Mm.
getting those gigs, you know. So, but enough about the comedy industry. I'm sure it will survive. It will come back. It might not. It might not be as what it was previously, you know. But it will come back. But let's talk about, uh, you know, what if you were in charge, because you live in Britain at the moment, what particular subject would you like us to talk about in terms of if comedians rule the world? What particular subject or
I
topic?
would I would love to talk about, I'd like to talk about homelessness.
Oh yeah, good, good, good. Why that subject?
Because I think it's like so, oh okay, this is going to sound awful, but I think it's so visual. Like I remember when I was a young kid walking down the street and you just see people in the cold, and you know, when you're a child you really feel the cold, and you just think of that person that they have nowhere else to go from the cold.
Yeah,
And I know that, I mean, maybe you could argue, I'm not sure because I haven't done the full research around the world, people might say that Britain is better than other places, but I still think that it's not where I would have it if I ruled the world. You know, I think that housing is a human basic requirement, and should be accessible to everybody.
yeah. I totally agree with you. It's really interesting that you have chosen this particular subject, and I will tell you a story. I wrote about it. This was Edinburgh Fringe 2017. I took a show called The Rise of the Comedy Dictator. and I did the Free Fringe. And I remember meeting an audience member who came several times to my show. And when he came the first time, I didn't think anything about it. He came the second time, I thought nothing about it. When he came the third time, and I was walking on the streets after the show, I saw him on the pavement. And I said to myself, I know that face, but I can't recollect where that face has come. But that face, that guy must have come to my show. So I went to meet him and I said, are you the guy who was at my show? He said, yes, I've seen you 3 times. What are you doing on the streets? He said, he's homeless.
Oh my God, I can't believe.
Yeah, and I was so moved by what he had said to me that I ended up, and I'm not bragging, the money I had collected from that show that day, I was so close to tears. Because when we think about how much is spent in Edible Fringe, and my social conscience, it was just such an amazing story to share with other people. And I don't know. I don't know what the solution is, but there's no excuse for the 6th largest economy in the world to have homelessness. That's my view. There's no, even when I went to, I did a gig at Monkey Business Comedy Club just before the second lockdown, and there was this homeless guy outside the venue. So 1 minute I was happy, I killed the gig without killing people. I came out, I saw this guy on the street. I saw this guy on the streets and I'm saying, wow, what is this? Why do we have this in Britain? Why can't this be resolved? But what would you differently? What do you think is the causes of homelessness?
Well, I mean, this is going to sound like against my point, but even the people who are not homeless, like if you look at the prices of the houses, like it's ridiculous. So I don't know how many times you're earning. Say somebody is on, I don't know, £30,000, and a house at the moment is what, between, in London, let's say, easily between 400 to 600,000. So it's so many multiples of that person's income. So you're kind of like forced into a commitment from as soon as you're able to for the longest period of your life, if not your whole life. So I think affordability is a big massive problem. Actually, just a quick cheeky plug, I did my podcast is No Country for Young Women, and actually last year we was able to visit a homeless shelter in Brixton.
Excellent.
And and the person who ran it, Solomon Smith, he's always fundraising off his own back, because when he tried to get government help, they were not really as helpful. So he just did things himself, having relationships with people like Nando's to give food to homeless people, etc. So he ran a food shelter. But what I took away from the conversation with Solomon was that people don't know how easy it is to become homeless. There's not enough empathy. Like, sometimes some people are only like 2 or 3 paychecks away from literally not being able to keep a roof on their head, and it's easily done to anybody. So we have to kind of get over the stigma of blaming people for the situation. We don't have enough empathy for people who struggle or are in difficult circumstances, and often people will not tell anybody until it's too late. Even if they might feel ashamed, they might not share that information that somebody could help them because of the stigma. So I think it's a really difficult thing to kind of ask for help, especially when you're applying for help, and maybe finding it quite a bureaucratic process and a difficult process. It's a very difficult situation, because just living is expensive, and costs are on the rise. I don't even want to talk about COVID and the impact on that, because what was really eye-opening back in March and April is in London, or in the UK actually I should say, they made the decision to house everybody who was homeless. And after a few months, obviously they stopped doing that, but for them to be able to do it so easily, it shows that they have the funds and they have a capability of doing that. So the question is why don't they do that? And I suppose one of the reasons is probably to keep the overpriced housing market the way it is, because if they were able to support people like that all the time, then people would be like, why am I paying my mortgage, or why am I doing this?
Yeah. So if I've heard you correctly, and that's my view. My view is that it can be resolved. You know, the country is rich enough to eradicate homelessness. But as we all know, certainly from what I have picked up, the way that the country is run, is a lot of these people have influences and are linked to the government. So their policies are dictated by or influenced by all these landlords and estate agents and property
Definitely.
developers. But you know, one of the things I was thinking of in terms of affordability is obviously if people weren't buying homes, yeah, it's not good for the economy. That would reduce affordability, and we know that there are. This is going to sound really harsh, but we know there are foreign investors. They come and buy houses in Chelsea and leave them empty. Surely, what the government should be doing is banning those sort of initiatives from happening. I know it's controversial, but if you reduce the house prices, then people will be able to afford to buy homes. That's my solution to it. Just ban foreign. It's almost Brexit. It's almost like Brexit. Just ban foreigners from buying homes, rich people from buying homes. That's what I would say. And actually, I would go down the route almost like China and basically say you can only have one home.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, look, I understand exactly what you're saying. I think there's a few questions here. Is that means that the government would have to prioritize its own people before other people? And at the moment, the way I see things, it prioritizes the wealthy over the non-wealthy.
Yeah, of course.
So they don't care whether you're from here or where you're from. If you have more money, you're more important. And those are the conversations we don't have enough. Like people always consumed with the conversations about race. But I think in Britain, the bigger issue than race is class. Also, in terms of what you were saying, I thought it was interesting. I guess one of the difficulties is that like they can't cap the price of a house. So like the market seems to kind of have its own mind, and so it will kind of up down up whatever, depending on things that they like the interest rate, etc. But like if they said like the house is not going to be more higher than X, I don't know what impact that would have. And look, I think it's just I know that it's a difficult thing to control. I think what you're saying is that we would like our government to care about our needs, and so obviously it's quite depressing or drastic to kind of conclude that perhaps that's not the case, which is not. It doesn't seem as though it's their priority at all, because they all have their second houses. The MPs have their second houses funded by us. We are paying for their second houses, but they don't want to help us with our one house. So always the people who don't have the money are bastardized, but it's the real people who are eating off other people that we enable.
And this is my point, and this is why I am not a great fan of democracy. I just think it's a virus. It's an infectious virus like COVID, and it's infected quite a number of people. Because my views, is that I don't think that a lot of these politicians have a conscience. Because I certainly, if I can go to a gig and come out and see homeless people and I'm not responsible for the policy and I feel for them, do you understand what I'm saying? That the empathy is not there. They are so far removed. They are so far removed and
Can I ask you this?
Yeah, go on.
Let me ask you, President. I would ask you this as a president, okay? But power corrupts.
Yeah.
That's where we're at, right? Because how do you're a human being. When you see a cold human being, a homeless on the street, you have that feeling, right? But when you get to a certain level, what is it about that power structure? What is it about that position where you stop caring and you're just like, well, I'm going to get my breakfast paid for with expenses and stuff? You earn like 6 figures easily, but yet you need to be looked after, and you don't get the same kind of bad publicity, should we say, or the bad labels and stereotypes of being quote unquote looked after.
Yeah.
And the people who are neglected are written off as benefit scroungers, this, that, and the other. I know what you're saying in terms of the failures of democracy. I completely, to be honest, I agree. But I think that the problem with places like China, like the way that they adopt the communism is not fair, and you can't speak out. So to be honest, I don't even feel that we speaking out in this country makes any difference. So whatever, it's a luxury, but it's like whatever, to what end? But in China, it's like the way that they have you, controlled is disturbing, because imagine that they are still powerful and therefore corrupt, but they're giving you the lies that everything is equal and you all get one home and you all get this, that, and the other. But a lot of people are not able to speak out when there's injustice.
Okay, 2 points. One, you asked me as president, power corrupts. Let me just remind you that I'm a fictional president. I have no power whatsoever. So I don't know how it feels when you actually get there. The second point is about what I meant about China was not necessarily to adopt their policy in terms of communism, but more about the fact that they have a one-child policy. Why can't Britain say, okay, you're only entitled to one home, you can't have more than one home? That's what I was referring to as just as an analysis.
But right, you already know the answer, because they want the wealthy to have, and then they want the non-wealthy to keep I suppose keep just where they are.
Yeah, and then the third point, which I've just remembered now, is when we're talking about politicians, especially in the UK, I don't know how many of them are not career politicians, if you get my drift. They don't have a conscience, they don't have empathy.
Yes.
Do you understand what I'm saying? So if they really want democracy to work, then stop electing people who have gone to Eton, stop electing people who are privileged. Go for people who are connected to the poor. Go and elect people who are working class people. Do you understand what I'm saying? Because that is where I think you can really see the difference in terms of how the policy will be shaped. You see, what is really ridiculous is Britain is such a mess in terms of its democracy that it's relying on me, a dictator, to advise them what they need to do to restructure their democratic institutions, because it doesn't, I'm sure you agree with me, it does not work. I keep hearing about the divide between the rich and the poor, and you can tell even when they get up and speak. I'm sure the poor are thinking, are these people really part of us? They're in a separate world, in a different world entirely. So how can you expect them to sort out homelessness? And when you think about homelessness, which race? Yeah, that's the other thing. Who does it affect the most when it comes to homelessness in the United Kingdom?
Well, I'm not being funny, but like ethnic people. So obviously people can't see me, but I'm Asian. The thing is, we are less we are like, there's less population. Sorry, there is a lower population of Black and Asian people. So obviously, white people will be the majority affected, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's like, I don't know, between 3 and 8% or so. I haven't done the full fact search recently, but I personally think that, going back to your point, which I thought was really interesting, about who you recruit into positions of power and politics, I think it's really interesting, because I think that you can get a good person. Like if you look at Marcus Rashford, he is a footballer, for the listeners who are listening from overseas who don't know. He's a footballer, and he is actually we have a school holidays, and he was campaigning so that the families from a lower income would be able to access free food, as they, would have school meals basically for the children. And after long campaigning and stuff, finally this hit home to the government that actually we'll fund this, but there was a lot of resistance at first. So this one is proving president's point about how you should kind of recruit people who are influential and also have empathy, because Marcus Rashford, the footballer I'm talking about, came from these humble beginnings, let's say. Now Marcus, for me, is an exception. My problem is that when you put someone in a culture which is basically, a certain way, which seeks to cut costs and cut, not to think of people as equal, and to I don't know, make living conditions harder for disabled people or people who are in need and vulnerable people, it's easier to not do what Marcus Rashford did. It is really hard what he did, because you're going to be subject to a lot of criticism and not fitting in. So you might cost your job basically. And what I'm saying is that also, when they're going to bribe you, not bribe you, but when they're going to suggest that, look, just look after yourself, you put yourself before everybody else. And I think that's where our system is wrong right now, because they are meant to be serving the people, but they are serving themselves.
Yeah, exactly. And this is stuff that I've always thought about, in terms of, at one point I was even considering going into politics, but you know how they would just let your skeletons, because I have lots of skeletons in my cupboard. Didn't want to appear in the Sun newspaper. But on a serious note, it's a case of, do poor people or working class people, do they see themselves when they look at Boris Johnson? Do they see themselves when they look at Matt Hancock and the people who actually lead this country? It's a blanket no. They don't. They're just from a different background. They're privileged. They've been groomed. Yeah, you know what I mean? Groomed, not the other way around, but groomed to become politicians and career politicians. So how can they have empathy? How can they understand what it's like to be homeless? How can they understand what it's like not to have 3 square meals in a day? Do you understand what I'm saying? So it's painful.
And you see that with the way that they're protecting Priti Patel. So she's the Home Secretary, and she's she has a bullying case against her, and Boris Johnson has very strongly showed his affiliation and support to Priti Patel, and that's what I'm talking about. They stop being part of the wider community, and they become politicians, career politicians, as you say, or just the makeup of them becomes more politicized than humanized. And so they'll
go on.
No, I'm finished. Sorry, go ahead.
No. So I was going to say, is that the lady they call Prickster? Is that who they're referring to? I saw lots of Priti Patel. Yeah. It's not really pretty, but it's okay. But yeah.
No, definitely not. The question here is that so the thing is, what you said was really interesting is about them selecting members of the community who is actually more representative of the country. But I guess the question there is, for that person who has the connections with the community, if they did take such a position of power, would that cost them the trust that they have or have worked for within the community? That's number one. Number two, what guarantees do they have that they will be able to, act with the intentions that they have going in, as opposed to being influenced and changed by the, by the system and it's the way that it works, the way the machine works.
Yeah, so, I know. I think some of this is almost like an excuse, because I know Donald Trump is not a very good example of a politician, but one of the things I think he cleverly did, even though he's on his way out, is he said he wasn't part of the establishment. And I still think that you can succeed in almost like with Donald Trump. We're not necessarily copying him, but there are people who are anti-establishment, people who are not within the establishment. I mean, for example, you might not agree with me. Jeremy Corbyn reminds me of that sort of person who is not really part of that circle, even though he's a millionaire now, and, but do you understand what I'm saying? I think it can be done. I think it needs to go back. Politics needs to go back to grassroots level. These local councillors, so far they have empathy. They are the ones who should end up becoming MPs because they are connected. They are the ones dealing with issues around housing, unemployment. They're connected to the community more than the MPs. A lot of these MPs are just maybe researchers who have just, they've supported a previous MP, boom, they're skyrocketed, and there they become an MP. I believe that's how it happens. I don't know how many.
And also, I think I know what you're saying about Trump. One of the things that I would say about him is that I think that at least he told it the way it was, which personally I found as a comedian very refreshing, because a lot of politicians will just sugarcoat it or lie, or completely misframe things. And although we may not have liked what he was delivering, I appreciate there was quite a candidness about the things that he was saying. He was really frank. Also, I think in terms of what you're saying, that the constituency should represent its people, I don't understand how we have like the oldest, like America now has the oldest president ever now, Joe Biden, like 78, I think 78 years old. Like, I don't understand. I mean, like, to be honest with you, some days I'm not even that old, but some days I'm like, I want to quit comedy, right? So you can imagine at that age, man is probably so tired of life, and he is going into one of the if not the most powerful position in the world.
What doesn't that even show that actually, as far as I'm concerned, as much as I want to go into politics, as much as I would like to be leader of a country, I think my view is that these leaders are just puppets. They're not the ones running the country. They're not the ones. It's the corporate sponsors, the people who sponsor their campaigns. So Biden is just going to be a figurehead, as far as I'm concerned. He's just going to be a figurehead, and he's just,
I think it goes back into your point about how much of a joke democracy has become.
Yeah, exactly. Look, I'm very cautious of the time, and I wish we could do more, because this is very intellectually stimulating, by the way. I never thought we're trying to find solutions for homelessness, a civilian and a military dictator. But it's been fantastic to have you as a guest. And I know there has been some really useful points that what I didn't say to you is that I will definitely, most likely, run in the general election as President Obonjo. And I would use some of your points in my manifesto for homelessness, how we're going to resolve homelessness. But before I close the show, Sadia, is there anything at all? I know you have a podcast. Do you want to plug that? Where can people find you, my listeners, my audiences? What is it you would like to say? You've got 2-3 minutes to say that.
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you again so much for having me. It has been a really nice discussion. I think it's important that we have discussions like this so that people who are listening, young and old, they feel that they are able to affect change, or that they have some sort of empowerment in the situation that they find themselves in, and that they are valued and have importance. In terms of me, I'd love you to follow me on social media. So you can find me at Sadia_Azmat on Twitter, and Instagram is mostly the places. And yeah, just look out for the stuff. My podcast is still available on BBC Sounds. It's called No Country for Young Women. And yeah, keep supporting President Obonjo.
Thank you, Sadia. You've noticed, and people will say I don't like the BBC. This is someone who works with the BBC, so this is evidence that I do like the BBC. For Sadia, thank you so much. I have thoroughly enjoyed food for thought. My great listeners, I hope you have enjoyed this. We will continue to invite as many. I'm just picking people that I like. I'm just picking them as, just think about someone. And I've got 2 more guests later on this evening. But if you have enjoyed this, please talk about it. If comedians rule the world, We are looking for opportunities. I certainly know that I am looking for an opportunity to gain power, and this is what I am doing. So I have now completed my homelessness manifesto, housing, and Sadia will be my Secretary of State for Housing. So thank you so much. Thank you so much for listening. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye. Well done. That was amazing, President.
Come on.
No, you were great. Well done.